DreAllDay.com.
You're now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves anyone out there, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And we put all this together into one bundle, one framework. We have codified our entire system. We have a manual on this. It might not be available yet, but it's coming, trust me, in 2021. We have a hardcover book. We got the university, and you'll listen to the masterclass that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is you. The topic is you, subject to change. That means whoever you are, whatever you have going on, whatever you think is going on right now, whatever you think the thing is, the wave is right now, it is subject to change. It is not going to stay the same as it is. Things will be different. There will be adjustments that happen along the way, and you will be wise to, first of all, be aware of this now, acknowledge it now, and be able to change with the times as they come, with an asterisk. So I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by this. Now, we know that change is the only constant in life. All right? That's the only thing that we know is always going to be happening, is that there will always be change. Anything else is happening right now, it seems like it's happening all the time. There will be lulls. There will be periods where nothing's happening. There'll be periods where it's happening a lot. Maybe it will completely end. Maybe something is not going on right now. Will just start up out of nowhere tomorrow. But the only thing that is constant, that will always be happening no matter what, is time. Time is one thing, that's a constant, and change is the other. But time is a kind of like a man-made thing. We created time. We created the fact that where I'm recording right now, it is 3:14 p.m. We created that. That's a man-made construct. But time, as far as like day and night and the seasons, that's something that existed before. We didn't create that. That's something that we just put words to. But change, that's something that's always happening. Now, since change is a constant in life, and you can hear my voice right now, that means you have a life. That means you are alive, at least at this moment. So this is one of those things that you'd be smart to go with the grain on this one, if you know what I'm saying. Going against the grain means you understand that this thing exists, but you're going to go against it. You're not going to follow that. Now, there are many things in life that a whole lot of people are always doing, and you probably would be wise to go against the grain and not follow everyone on it, because it's probably not going to lead you anywhere successful. So one thing that a whole lot of people do, I told you 3 truths about people. Number 1, people are lazy. Number 2, people don't think. And number 3, people don't read. So you probably shouldn't follow people on that. All right, now people who listen to this show, this is an exceptional group of individuals. So if you happen to be listening to this, I'm not talking about you. But if you think about the people that you know and that you see on a daily basis, you know that is the grain. You'd be wise to go against the grain on that. But on this subject, you should probably go with the grain and be able to adjust the change, recognize change, and at least examine what the changes are that are happening and see where and if it makes sense for you. I'll explain what I mean as we get into our points. So we go to point number 1. The topic, once again, is that you and life are subject to change. Point number 1, have as few sacred cows as possible. Now, we talked about sacred cows in episode number 1699. The topic was getting rid of those sacred cows and making sure that you're not holding on to things that are no longer serving you in life. Let me tell you what that episode was specifically. It was episode 1699, 4 ways to avoid living in the past forever, which means sacrificing those sacred cows. Every sacred cow that you insist on holding on to, you got to be able to tell yourself why you're doing it. And when I say a sacred cow, for those who didn't hear episode 1699, first of all, I suggest you go listen to episode 1699. Why you didn't hear it, I don't know. But if you didn't, go listen to it. And for those who don't know what it means, and even those who do, let me remind you, the sacred cow is an idea or a habit or a way of being or a way of thinking, way of acting that you have just held on to, and you just keep doing it simply because you probably can't even always explain why you keep doing it. It's just something that you do all the time. You're just holding on to. I've always done it that way. I'm just going to keep doing it. It's like a person who always drives a Ford F-150. Their grandfather drove one. Their dad drove one. They got one. Now they just keep getting the Ford F-150. It may not necessarily be the best truck for them. They got 5 kids and a wife, but they keep driving that Ford F-150 because that's just what they've always done. We've always done it this way. We're just going to keep doing it this way. That is, again, a rough example of a sacred cow, but it's any habit that you just say, I'm just going to keep this. I remember I was talking to someone years back about cord cutting. For those who, many of us, I think these days don't even have regular cable television. I do not have cable television. I borrow somebody else's login so I can log on and watch like sporting events online. But I got a laptop, maybe I might have a couple laptops, I don't even know. I got a couple tablets, I got a couple smartphone devices. I watch everything through that. Anything that's happening, I get through the internet. I do not have wired cable. I do pay an internet bill. My internet bill is high enough to be for damn cable and TV and phone all put together, honestly, if you let me tell it. But the whole point is, when I was talking to someone years back about cord cutting and letting go of having cable TV and just doing everything through the internet, just pay an internet bill and you get everything online. You just get those kind of subscriptions. And they said to me, well, I'm kind of stuck in my ways. This is an older individual. So I'm kind of stuck in my ways. I don't want to make that change. They were holding on to that sacred cow of always having cable TV. It was a sacred cow that this person had in their mind. So being stuck in your ways or stuck in a certain habit or just stuck, period, in a certain time in the past and staying with it just because it's what you're comfortable with, is in your comfort zone, that is a sacred cow. So when you do have sacred cows, I'm not telling you got to sacrifice all your sacred cows, but if and when you do have them, you got to be able to explain to yourself, not to everyone else necessarily, but to yourself, why am I keeping this sacred cow? What is the sacred cow doing for me? If your only reasoning is it's always been this way, I've always done it this way, you are in the danger zone. The danger zone of just getting stuck in your comfort zone. That's a danger zone simply because you can't grow and expand if you only stay in your comfort zone and you don't step out of it and try or look at something new. And the problem with staying in your comfort zone is that the rest of the world is always evolving. The rest of the world is always changing and moving. That's the very topic we're talking about here today. So if you're staying the same, stuck in yesterday, but the world is moving into today and tomorrow and the day after that, then you are losing by default because you're not moving with the rest of the world. This is not a good reason to keep doing something simply because you've always done it. That is actually one of the worst reasons to keep doing something, is because you've always done it. Now, if you have always done something, but there's a good reason to always do it, then you should probably keep doing it. So for example, if you're the type of person, I'm the type of person who goes to the gym all the time. I work out every single day, whether I go to the gym or I do some type of cardio, even if I just take a walk for a mile or two, I do some kind of physical exercise every single day. I've always done it. All right, that's not the reason that I do it, but I have always done it. The reason why I do it, because it makes me feel good, helps get the energy out, it helps me do better to do things like this where I'm sitting down in front of a camera, in front of a microphone and recording. I'm able to do this better and do the writing and all the other stuff that I do that's work-based that y'all know about, because I go do the stuff that's physical activity / self-care / health. I'm able to do this because I do that. All right, that's the reason for it. That's the explanation I give to myself as to why I do it. That's how I justify it in my own mind. I don't need to justify it for you. That's why I justify it to me. So if you can't justify it to yourself, any other reason other than is because I've always done it this way, you are in the danger zone of getting stuck in the comfort zone. All right, if things change, for example, let's say you're an architect, you design buildings, you're in the construction business, and things change in the architectural world, as in like the way buildings get designed or the kind of materials that people use, but you still insist on every building that you have your name on, it must be strong enough, the foundation got to be strong enough to withstand really strong hurricane force winds. You have a reason for doing that, not because you've always done it that way. Maybe you have always done it that way, but that's not the reason. The reason is so that this new age design building, even if we're using new materials, even if there's this new way of doing things, even if there's this new efficiency, there's this new version of steel that we didn't know about before we're going to use now. Okay, we'll make all those changes and update ourselves with the times, but at the same time, we're going to hold on to this sacred cow from the past and making sure this building doesn't blow over if we have a hurricane down here in South Florida. I think that's a good reason to keep a sacred cow. Again, if you can explain the reason why you're holding on to the sacred cow that makes sense no matter what the time is, then it makes sense to hold on to it. But if you can't explain it, then it might be time to sacrifice that cow. It might be time to slaughter that cow and throw it over the edge of the cliff. Again, that's episode 1699, where we talk about sacrificing your sacred cow so you can avoid living in the past forever. If you're a person who grew up in the 80s or in the 90s, the 1980s, 1990s that is, and your parents were the kind of parents, and if you grew up in the 80s and 90s, I think I'm pretty safe to assume your parents were the kind of parents that would kick your ass for being bad. And I don't mean kick your ass like yelling. I mean literally kick your ass. Maybe literally kicking your ass for being bad. Maybe you don't do that to your kids. Or maybe you decided, I'm going to change. That's the change I'm going to make. I'm not going to kick my kids' ass and beat them up. But one thing that my parents did do that I am gonna hold on to, my kids still gotta listen to me. All right, they still gotta be respectful, and there still will be punishment, maybe just a different type of punishment, and they don't do what they're supposed to do. So you can be flexible to adaptation, and at the same time have a solid reason for the things that you keep the same. So this is the art kind of updating yourself with the times. Let's move on to point number 2. The topic once again is you and life, subject to change. Number 2, be willing to experiment. All right, as times change, as people change, you are going to change. Be willing to experiment, meaning let me try this thing out. Let me see what this thing is about. Maybe I'll change with it. Maybe I won't, but let me at least see what's going on. All right, now when you get into a frame of mind that you don't even want to see what's going on, again, you're stepping into the danger zone. We're going to talk about that in one moment. Some things in life are always going to stay the same, and they should always stay the same. All right, that's something that's coming. For example, if you live in the United States, when you're driving and you come up to a traffic light and the light is red in front of you, usually it's safely assumed that everyone at the red light is going to stop, and then everyone at the green light is going to go. Now, that's something that is probably going to stay the same, and I hope that does stay the same. I hope there's no change to where it's like, you know what, we're free spirits. Everybody can just drive when they feel like driving. That's probably going to lead to a lot of death and a lot of accidents and a lot of other kind of headaches that we don't want. So there are certain things in life that should stay the same. All right, if you're eating meat and you got some raw meat that you got from the grocery store or from the butcher, you should probably cook it before you eat it. All right, that's something that, and unless science changes, and who knows, science may change things, but for now, that should probably stay the same. You should probably cook raw meat before you eat it. So there are certain things that should stay the same, but there are also things that should remain flexible. They should remain open. Let's take a look at this. For example, if you happen to be a sport coach, you coach a football team or a basketball team, you may have something that stays the same, such as, let's say if I was coaching a sports team, I would have something like, everybody better be on time for practice. All right, practice at 3 o'clock. One of my college coaches used to say, practice at 3 o'clock, that means everybody better be on the court and ready to practice at 2:45. You better be 15 minutes early and ready, not 2:45 putting your shoes on, not 2:45 walking the gym. 2:45, you're ready to practice 15 minutes early, not 2:47, not 2:59, 2:45. That's something that he probably carried over from his playing days, and if he was still coaching, he'd probably still be doing it now. And any of my teammates from back then, if they're coaching, they might be doing it with their players. That's something that may always stay the same, but at the same time, as a sporting coach, if one year I got, Shaquille O'Neal on my team, I'm going to run a certain type of offense. I'm going to play a certain way because we're going to get a ball to Shaquille O'Neal so he can do his thing. I'm talking about Shaquille O'Neal when he was playing, not TNT Shaquille O'Neal. And the next year, let's say Shaq's not on the team anymore, but I got Stephen Curry and James Harden on my team. I'm going to run a different type of style. Why? Because there are different players on my team. Because of the personnel change, I'm going to change the way that I run my style. But whether Shaquille O'Neal's on the team or Steph Curry or James Harden or LeBron is on the team, everybody better be on time for practice. All right, that thing ain't changing either way. So this is where I say be willing to experiment with the things that are experimental, but at the same time, there are some hard and fast things that ain't changing. So you may change what you're doing based on the personnel, but you're not going to change some of your overall principles. This is something that I was just recently re-listening to the episode where I had my college basketball teammate, and nowadays he is a D2 college basketball head coach, Wes Pfeiffer. He was on episode number 1577. We were talking about career advancement, connecting with current players, going overseas and playing at a D2. And we were talking in that episode about our college coach, that the coach that actually recruited Wes to my school, but he had kind of came in after I was already there. And we were talking about what Wes was talking about, how he didn't always see eye to eye with that coach because this coach actually violated this exact point that I'm making here. And that he was brand new to head coaching. This guy was named Armin Gilliam. He passed away probably about a decade or so ago. But when he was coaching, he had some hard and fast ideas that should have been experimental. And then he had some experimental ideas that should have been hard and fast. So he kind of was doing the exact opposite. When it came to like being on time for practice, he didn't have any hard and fast rules for that. He wasn't even on time for practice all the time. We didn't operate the same way all the time in the things that we were doing as far as the overall principles of the program, the way we did things, the way we ran events and all that stuff. He didn't have that set up. And then when it came to the experimental things, he wasn't flexible in them. So for example, Wes was giving the example that I remember. Wes was talking about how Wes is the point guard on the team, and he liked to drive to his left. If he was doing a move, he liked to go to his left more than he liked to go to his right. So he said to the coach one time, or at least he was thinking it, or he tried to intimate it to the coach, hey, why are we going to run the play on the right side of the court if I'm the one with the ball and I like to go to my left? We should probably run it on the left side of the court. But the coach wasn't really trying to hear it. The coach was not open to experimenting with that idea, even though West, the guy with the ball, was suggesting that, hey, maybe we can experiment with this. So the coach is making sacred cows of the things he should have been changing and changing the things that should have been sacred cows. And this led to confusion, and it led to the whole program just going in all different directions, and it led to that coach not sticking around as a coach for very long in his coaching career. Ironically, he went back to being a player after he stopped coaching. Maybe he should have never left. But all that being said, we're still on point number 2 here. The topic again today is you, along with life, subject to change. As things are always changing around you, we're still on point number 2. Take a look at that change. Take a look at the things that are changing. Take a look at the things that you might change. Take a look at the things that maybe should be open to conversation or open to adjustment, and at least understand it. Understand what's going on without outright rejecting it before you even know the why of it, the what of it, and what's going on with it. So, for example, Army Gilliam is that basketball coach. If his point guard says to him, hey, coach, I like going to my left, so maybe we could run the same play that you said run, but we're just going to run it on the other side of the court because it's more comfortable for me. A coach who understands this concept that I'm talking about here should at least be open to that. A coach who understands this concept understands that the offense that they ran when they had Shaquille O'Neal on the team is different from the offense you're going to run when Shaq's gone and you got Steph Curry as your best player. Those are 2 completely different offenses, right? We would agree you're probably not going to run the same type of offense with those different types of players. Why? Because things have changed. But this is what an open-minded individual does. The challenge is a lot of us become less and less open-minded, or we become more and more closed-minded the older that we get. The more we keep doing the same things over and over again, we fall into this comfort zone of life, and we resist anything that threatens our residency in the comfort zone, for a lack of a better term. I remember when Twitter first came out. This is around 2008 into 2009 when it started to become popular. I think it came out in 2000, might have come out maybe in 07, I don't know. But I heard of it in late 2008. It was right after Obama won his first term as president. I joined Twitter. And then probably around 2009, going into 2010, that's when Twitter started to really pop and become popular. And people started to know what it was, or at least have an idea what it was, before everybody actually got on it probably a couple years later. But when Twitter first came out, I remember many people who are older than me, probably people who are these days in their 50s and into their 60s, they would say stuff like, man, Twitter, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. This is a complete waste of time. Why do I care what somebody ate for lunch? I don't want to hear what you're eating for breakfast. I don't care if you're getting on a plane. I don't want to hear your random thoughts over the course of a day. It's so stupid. And many of those same people who were saying that back then, now they're consistent users of Twitter, maybe even powerful users of Twitter who have big followings and love using it every single day. Now, of course, Twitter has changed and evolved over time. It's become more of I use Twitter kind of like my news feed. Twitter is the place where I get news. If I want to know what's going on in the world, I go to Twitter and just find out. I just go through my feed and just read what's going on. That's how I know what's going on in sports. That's how I know what's going on in politics. And I make sure I follow enough people that I can get an overall picture of what's going on. And if I hear about something that I didn't see on Twitter, I just do the search and I see what's being talked about, and I find out what the conversation is. So Twitter itself has evolved over time, and people's opinions of it have evolved over time. But the point that I'm making, the reason I'm bringing that up, is when it first came out, a bunch of people just outright rejected it and said, forget this, I'm never using this is stupid, it doesn't make any sense. But they hadn't even used it. They hadn't even used the app. All they saw was a few people maybe talking about it, and they got a little basic idea. They didn't really dig into it, and they said, no, forget it, never using it. Now they're using it right now. And many of those that same class of people, maybe not the same individuals, but the same group of people with the same mindset of being stuck in dealing with their sacred cows or things they would never do or things they would always do, they may be saying the same thing about a platform like TikTok these days, or they may say it about whatever the next thing is that comes out. We always know there's something new that's coming out. So it doesn't mean, understand something, this does not mean that you need to get involved in and you need to dive in and just go hard on every new thing that comes out. Personally, I have a TikTok account, but I haven't published anything. I don't post anything on TikTok. I don't even open the app and look what anybody else is publishing. It's not me, at least not as of now. But who knows? That might change. I'm open to that change. Right now, I use probably Instagram the most. I have a Facebook page. I use Twitter as a news source. And that's pretty much what I do. Right now, I think my favorite platform for publishing is what you're listening to right now. This is my favorite platform, is doing a podcast masterclass right here. But that may change. Who knows? Maybe we'll have 3D. Maybe we'll have virtual reality, so where it feels like I'm sitting on the couch talking to you one-on-one, and I'm doing this exact same thing in the future. Who knows? But we got to stay open to that stuff. So just know what is going on and why it's going on, and then from there, you can decide after you understand it, rather than just saying no to anything outright because it's new or because it's hard for you to grasp, or you just don't want to open your mind to anything that's outside of what you're comfortable with. Because as soon as you get into a space where you're stuck in your ways, or you don't want to look at anything just because you're not familiar with it, or it doesn't look like what you're used to, that's when you become old. All right, you know what an old person is? Old does not mean you're X number of years. Old is not about how you look. It's not about, if you're not in shape anymore. It's not about if you got wrinkles on your face. Old is when you get into a mentality. Old is the way that you think. A mentality of being stuck in the past that has already happened and is not coming back. The future is going on and it continues to evolve, but you're still stuck back in yesterday. That's when you become old. All right, so you could be 19 and old. All right, you could be 40 and old. You could be 65 and young, just because of the way that you look at life and the way that you approach things that are brand new to you. Are you open to it, or are you closed off just because you're not familiar with it? Point number 3. The topic once again today is you, subject to change. Understanding all of this, I touched on this already. This doesn't mean you cannot have some principles that stay in place, some principles that are unchanging over time. Think of the concept of pivoting. Everyone's heard of the concept of the pivot in the business world, especially. In the year 2020, a lot of people in the business world did a whole lot of pivoting simply because there were certain aspects of business that we could not do because of the global pandemic that was going on. Hopefully, maybe by the time you hear this, the pandemic has started to calm down and we can get back to, at least somewhat back to what we were doing before this. So in the business world, for example, using myself as an example, I do professional speaking, speeches at conferences and things like that. And we couldn't do that in the year 2020. After the month of, I think there were several events I went to in January and February. Then the pandemic really got everyone's attention in March. I mean, people were talking about it before, but it got everyone's attention in America in March in full force. And that was it. There were a few handful of events that were scattered around after March through the end of the year. But for the most part, a lot of big conferences got canceled. There were a couple speaking gigs I had booked for January and February 2021 this year that already got either canceled or postponed, or they said, well, we're going to hold off. We don't know exactly what we're going to do yet. And a lot of people whose businesses, and a bunch of colleagues of mine, people that I know that I'm in masterminds with, their business is based on doing keynote speeches. It's keynote speech, they can make a lot of money for a keynote speech. You do a certain number of them over the course of a year, you can make 6 into 7 figures a year just doing keynote speeches. Now, my business was never 100% based on it, but I know people whose business were all based on doing keynotes. They had to pivot their business. They had to change the way they did business because they couldn't do the thing that they made all their money from. Any of you who's in the food service industry, you know that a lot of things changed in 2020. Whether you ran a brick and mortar business where people came in and sat down, a ton of things changed in your business in 2020. I know of a bunch of really good food establishments that I personally went to and liked that no longer exist. They went out of business during the pandemic in 2020. There are some businesses that were based on, let's say, delivery, like the Uber Eats and the Postmates and the DoorDashers. They did great in 2020 because everybody had to use them because a lot of people didn't want to go outside, and a lot of businesses that were used to having customers come in, now they had to have customers either pick up or delivery or something like that simply because they didn't have any other choice. So those were the kind of pivots. There's a guy in one of my business mastermind groups. I forget the name of the company that he runs. His name is Matan, and I forget his last name, but he ran a business in New York City, and there was a gym in New York City, and his business was doing great. He had made it was either the Inc. 500, I think it was the Inc. 500, one of the fastest growing companies in America the year before. Then the pandemic hit, and any of you who knows anything about how New York handled the pandemic, everything was shut down, especially a gym. Anywhere people could gather in person was completely shut down. He could not run his business at all, and a lot of businesses went out of business because of that. He pivoted, and what his pivot was we're going to learn how to do this online. We're no longer people come to the gym business. We're no longer a gym. We're an online business now. And he made a pivot, and he did a presentation at a conference, a virtual conference that I was at late in 2020 talking about this. This is the first I'd heard of the guy. but that was the presentation that he had made, talking about that pivot. But the reason I'm bringing up pivoting is this. Any of you who actually knows what a pivot is, we're talking about a physical pivot. In the basketball world, the way pivoting works, and you can maybe look this video up to get a better visual if you don't know what it is, it's when you can anchor your one foot to the ground. Let's say you anchor your left foot to the ground, but you are not allowed to move. You're not allowed to lift that left foot off the ground, but you can be on your toes and you can spin around on the toes. You can go around and pirouette in a circle while keeping that left foot down. So the pivot means you may change the direction that you're facing and you are able to turn 360 degrees, but your center of gravity, that foot that you have on the ground, that left foot, is still there. You're still anchored in the same space, but you just may turn in a different direction. So again, this is the basketball coach who says, okay, we're gonna run all of our offense through the big man in the middle because we got Shaquille O'Neal on the team this year. Then next year, when Shaq's gone and we got Steph Curry, we're gonna run all our offense through this guard who can shoot 3-pointers. It's a completely different offense, but we're still anchored in, everybody's gonna be on time for practice. We're gonna work hard on defense. We're gonna practice every single day. It's all about winning. We're gonna focus on rebounding, and we're gonna have a culture of winning championships. Those things didn't change. The anchor is still there. We just pivoted into the way that we're gonna get to that outcome, but the outcome is no different. That is the concept of pivoting. Your center of gravity is still there, even while you pirouette in that 360 degrees, different directions that you can face in order to get to your outcome. So the art of change, everyone, is knowing what and when to change versus what and when not to change. And this is an art. It is not a science, because the science means I can give you a prescription. I can say, all right, when this happens and this happens, then you do this, or if that happens, or they say this, then you do this. That's not the way that it works. I wish it was, because if it were, then I would write that whole formula down in a manual and I would sell it to you. But it's an art, meaning you got to have a feel. You got to have a fingertip feel for what's going on and get a feel for why it's happening and make decisions on the fly. And sometimes the decision you made today is the right decision today, but that would be the wrong decision if you made it tomorrow, just based on the ever-changing circumstances of life. Some people would love it if someone like myself or anyone else could just give you a prescription. All right, this happens, do this, that happens, do that. But understand that life doesn't work that way. Business doesn't work that way. And this is where experience comes in and you learn that art. And we got a masterclass coming on a topic that is very close to this very soon. So you stay tuned. Make sure you are subscribed to the show wherever you happen to be listening. And if you haven't left us a review yet on Apple Podcasts, please do so. We're looking to get to 1,000 reviews by the end of this year. So let's recap today's class. The subject is you, subject to change. Change being the only constant in life. You have a life, so that means you need this masterclass. Number one, have fewer sacred cows. We talked about this in episode 1699. Everything that you insist on holding on to, at least have a reason for why you are holding on to it. So if you have something that you're going to say, I'm never changing this, there should be a solid reason that you can explain to yourself that makes sense in any time period as to why you're going to hold on to it. If you don't have that reason, then maybe you have a sacred cow that needs to be sacrificed and you can eat it for dinner tonight. Point number two, be willing to experiment. Some things will always stay the same and should stay the same. We're going to talk about that. But some things should remain flexible. So, such as a sports coach might say, I'm never changing the fact that everybody better be on time for practice, but I will adjust the way we run our offense based on the players that we have on our team. So when you do see an opportunity for change, at least understand what the opportunity is before you just outright reject it. Know exactly what it is and why you're rejecting it, if you reject it, before you reject it. A lot of times in life, people just turn things away and say, no, I'm not interested. Don't even know what they're saying they're not interested in. And that is a mistake because things are changing in life all the time. If you insist on staying the same and rejecting anything that is new, it won't be long before life has completely passed you by and you have become old. And you're not old based on the number of candles on your birthday cake. You're old based on the way that you look at new and innovative ideas. Point number three, this doesn't mean you can't have some principles that will stay in place and will not change over time. Think of the concept of pivoting. Pivoting means you stay rooted in one place, but you're allowed to turn and pirouette as much as you want. So you can change the direction that you're facing and the way you're going to go about doing something, but the anchor, which is the outcome or the principles that you're standing on, those do not change at all. Many people would love that if life just gave them a prescription. If this happens, do that. If that happens, do that. Life is not colored by numbers. This is where experience comes in, and you have to learn the art of making decisions. And we talked about that in many different masterclasses here, and I'll refer you to those in a future masterclass we got coming up on decision making. And we also talked about discernment in episode number 1431. So that's one you can refer to right now. But if you have not yet gotten your free copy of my book, The Mirror of Motivation. This is the book that you will look at. This is a book that will cause you to look in the mirror and ask yourself who you need to be when you're looking at change, when you're looking at making adjustments, when you look at should I adjust myself based on this new situation that's happening, or should I keep things the same? And looking into yourself, who you are being as a person before you decide what to do. Then you get the thing that you want to have. Be, do, have. Claim your free copy of that book by going to mirrorofmotivation.com. Once again, mirrorofmotivation.com. Work on your game. Dre all day.